is troubling, and I have friends and colleagues in the International Human Rights Network who go all around the world trying to argue for basic accountability for lawbreaking as a foundation of a democratic or even just a basic just republic. And so I think if we take away the idea that there are consequences for actions and that the law is not going to step in, that we fundamentally damage our situation. I have some sympathy for the president saying, you know, look, I want to move forward. I don't want to spend 4 years mired in what happened the 8 years before that. But I don't think our country is so small that we can't also take a look back and investigate where a criminal or civil sanction is appropriate and still tackle the problems of the day. I think we're a big enough country that we can do both.
Ms. Cohn, this entire subject is, of course, at least politically, viewed through the prism of 9/11. The FBI, the CIA, and the entire government was roundly criticized, rightly so, for their failures to identify what was coming against us. Is it your position that there is no constitutional way in which the government can do general intelligence gathering to give us warning of impending terror?
Well, I think that there's a couple things to unpack in the question. I thank you for the question. The first thing is that I think if you talk to anybody who actually does this kind of data analysis with the hope of predicting future, who's going to be a terrorist in the future, they will tell you that doesn't work. That there is no reliable scientific data and no scientific methods that can tell you that by broad-scale data mining you can predict who's going to be a terrorist and who's not. The science just isn't there yet, and most people will tell you that it's not going to be there anytime soon because of the unpredictability of the behavior of terrorists and their switching things and other things. There's some researchers at Rice who've actually done, Rice University have done some really good work on this. So I think there's a fallacy underlying this, which is if we just listen in to everybody all the time and pay attention to everything everybody said, we'll be able to figure out who's a terrorist in advance and we'll be able to stop it. And you know, I love 24. It's a great show, but one should not confuse what a screenwriter can write with what a scientist can do. They are not the same. And any lawyer who's watched a law movie or any scientist who's watched a science movie, hopefully you can extrapolate over from your experience to the difference between what a screenplay can write and what science can do. The fallacy is very clear. Now, can the government use tools in order to try to predict, and could they have done better than they did after 9/11? I think absolutely, and there are lots of things. And frankly, securing cockpit doors was one of the leading things that came out. There's lots of things the government can do to make us safe without actually flipping around the Fourth Amendment on its head and returning us to general warrants. And we don't oppose all of them. In fact, I think there's a lot. We'd like to be part of an actual public discussion about what some of those are. So I think the government has tremendous data gathering capabilities already. Tremendous, huge quiver full of arrows that they can use to try to do this. Tearing down the walls between the surveillance people and domestic so that everybody knows what everybody else knows is something that I have some qualms about, but certainly there's more of that than was done before. But frankly, the law didn't need to change to do that. That was mainly a regulatory and a policy issue inside the Department of Justice. I don't think we needed the legal changes that came about in order to do that. So yes, can the government do things to try to protect us from terrorists? Of course. But there needs to be a balance, you know. If we can't really hand the ability to decide which tools to use, which tools not to use, and how to use them solely to the people in one branch of government or who feel the obligation to protect us. You need to have checks and balances in the system, and I'm afraid that a lot of the stuff that was enacted in the Bush administration had no such checks and balances. We may decide as a country that we want to throw out the Fourth Amendment. My problem is, I don't think we will actually, but my problem is that this happened in secret, in silence. The American people weren't told. Members of Congress weren't told. It seems clear that the abbreviated briefings that were given to members of Congress were woefully insufficient in order to even let them know what was going on. This is no way to run a railroad, even if you might think that at the end of the day we would make some choices different than the ones that I would make. having a process where we decide as a country what the balance ought to be between our rights is certainly step one. And I think we need to have that step.
Ms. Scott, I've heard a number of people say that this battle has already been lost, that the technology is there one way or another, it's going to get used, and when you talk about privacy, they shrug their shoulders and say, I don't have it anymore. I want to know how you respond to those kinds of arguments.
Well, it's a very good question. Sometimes we worry that you're on the wrong side of history with, Google and some of these big companies making surveillance of you their business model. But I think we can draw, just calling a spade, my friends. They make cool tools too, but I just really don't like the transaction that we're being asked, actually not even being asked, it's been hidden from us in this. But I think we can draw distinctions between, I think we still can have the rule of law, even with cool new technologies. I'm a big fan of technologies. I want us to be able to use them. I'm a geek myself, or at least geek-friendly. But I think we need to figure out how to do the balance. And I certainly think we can draw the line between what information is available and how easy it is for the government to get it. There's nothing about the warrant requirement. It's tech neutral. The fact that there's technology that means you can get around a warrant, well, that technology has always existed. A battering ram could get into your house regardless of whether they got a warrant. The technology has always existed to do search and seizures of Americans easily, cheaply, and without any need. But nonetheless, we brought our pesky due process and separation of powers rules into it. And I think in the context of government access to information, we really need to think seriously about how we're going to update those requirements to the digital age, but keep them in place. The other thing, I guess, kind of on the private issue, the general issue, the Scott McNeely, famous quote of Scott McNeely of Sun, privacy is dead, get over it, is one that I really disagree with. I think that there is a difference between, the people are now sharing more of their lives online, Facebook and all sorts of things. I think there's a difference between what is kind of fundamentally about exhibitionism and what is fundamentally about lack of control. What we're dealing with in the warrantless wiretapping is something that we don't have any control over, we don't have any choices about, and we don't even know is going on. And I think we can fix all of those things and need to fix all of those things in the commercial context as well as in the governmental context, and bring us into a situation where we have control over our privacy and how much we want to reveal publicly and how much we don't. And those tools exist too. This is there can be tech answers to these tech problems. I mean, my first big fight that I did with Ray Vesfari, who's here today, was about encryption technology. Encryption technology is the ability to keep information secret. And in the 1990s, when Ray and I were engaged in some litigation around this, the government wanted to basically have a monopoly on this, that only the government could keep information secret, but ordinary Americans couldn't have the tools to keep their own information secret. Encryption is the science of secret codes. And we fought and won a battle to get all of you the powerful technologies in order to be able to keep your basic information secret and use and have a measure of control over what you reveal and what you don't reveal. In the context of your web surfing, there's a technology called Tor that you can use to hide where you're coming from. There are technological solutions for most of these problems, and I think it's a policy decision on behalf of companies and the government that withholding these technological choices from us in order to create a situation where the status quo and the easy answer appears to be giving up your privacy. These are not technical problems.